Hey everyone, my name is Scott Grant, and I invest money. For over 3 decades, I've been a professional investor, and I've learned a lot, and I want to share some of those things with you. And so every Thursday night at 6:22, we've been going live to tell a different story. Tonight we're going to talk about Apple, and we'll get to that in a second. First, I want to give a shout out to my college roommate, and he called me this week and he said, "You wear the same sport coat in every episode." Now that's not true, but I am often in a tweed sport coat. He says, "You must have that lying around the office." And I said, "Woody, you're right, I do." So I wore this sport coat tonight for you, my college roommate. We're going to talk about apples, and apples have the fantastic history. Ultimately, I'm going to talk about the Apple Corporation. But before I do, I wanted to just segue a little and talk a little bit about apples. One of the earliest references to apples is in the book of Genesis. They say Eve tempted Adam with an apple, and that once Eve and Adam had eaten the forbidden fruit, they were thrown out of paradise. Now, it wasn't actually an apple. We don't know what kind of fruit it was, but it's tradition to show Eve and the serpent giving the apple to Adam and creating original sin. The next sort of big apple story is Sir Isaac Newton. And in the midst of a plague in England, Newton leaves his studies in Cambridge and returns to his mother's garden, and supposedly he's sitting under a tree when one day an apple falls and hits him in the head. And that apple hitting him in the head, tradition says, was when he discovered gravity. That there must be some force pulling the apple down towards the earth, and the earth was pulling the apple. Turns out the apple didn't hit him in the head, but Sir Isaac Newton throughout his life claimed that he did see an apple fall in his mother's garden in England and I think Lincolnshire, and that gave him the idea for gravity. In America, we often associate apples with a guy named Johnny Appleseed. Now, his real name was John Chapman, and apparently he wandered the country in the late 1700s into the 1800s barefoot, planting apple trees. And, you know, we talk about an apple a day will keep the doctor away, and so we're often told this story that Johnny Appleseed wandered the country planting apples to keep children healthy. In fact, the type of apples he was planting were the type that you would use in hard cider. So really, Johnny Chapman was traveling the frontier, creating orchards or gardens, nurseries of apples to make apple cider to drink. And so if you're having a drink right now, or you have one later tonight, you should know you're engaging in one of the great American traditions. And we make hard cider today and sell it in bottles. It's pretty good, actually. But the hard cider from crab apples is a rich American tradition. So, okay, enough about Apple, and let's talk about the Apple, because this tutorial and all my tutorials are about stocks, and I'm trying to make some things fun. So I want to talk about the Apple Corporation, which is one of the, I think, the largest corporation in the world right now, or second largest, behind Tesla. And both Tesla and Apple have almost cult-like followings from investors. Very popular stocks. The Apple Corporation, as a publicly traded corporation, will this December celebrate its 40th anniversary. It went public in December of 1980. And the Shilbrocks reached out to me, my good friends Scott and Julie, and they asked me about how Apple had done over the last 10 or 20 years, which kind of got me thinking, let's go back to the beginning. So, and I'm just digging my whiteboard. Had you invested $1,000 on 12/12/1980 when Apple originally went public, you would now have 1,198,909, which is pretty good, right? Not quite 40 years, 39 and 3/4 years. Had you done the same thing 10 years later on today's anniversary, so 8/20/90, you would have 359,542. Still a pretty decent amount of money. And had you done that 10 years later, in August of 2000, you would now have $130,471. And finally, 10 years ago, had you done the same thing, you'd have 13,208. I should point out that there were some opportunities between the initial public offering and sometime in 1981 to have even bought this cheaper, and you could have even made more money. What's interesting to me is that, particularly with this purchase, had you lived in certain states in the United States, you would not have been able to buy this stock at the initial public offering. It's often pointed out that the state of Massachusetts banned their citizens from buying Apple the day that it came out. Additionally, the article I read said that the states of Texas, Illinois, Wisconsin, Alabama, Oklahoma also banned the sale of Apple, or banned their citizens from buying Apple stock. And Massachusetts did it partially because they had a previous offering on a company called Genentech. And Genentech had not done well initially, and a number of people in the state of Massachusetts were upset. So their financial regulatory board said, nope, can't buy Apple, it's too expensive. Okay, so, all kind of neat. I guess you're sitting here wishing you had invested in 1980, or maybe in 1990, but the rest of these numbers don't look all that impressive. Frankly, they are impressive. And a lot of people think you need to get in on the ground floor. And looking at these numbers, you'd say the returns since the beginning have got to be the best. And that's not true. Actually, when we annualize these returns out, the return since 1980 is 19.5%. The return since 1990 is 21.7. The return since 2000 is 27.5. And the return in the last 10 years, when your 1,000 grew to 13,000, 29%. Apple had 1,000 employees on December 12, 1980, and 40 of them became millionaires overnight. Somebody investing would have taken them 40 years on a small investment. But it's not that the return was so great in the beginning, it was time. Time is the critical element. And what we want to do is we want to buy a good business, and in this case Apple has a good business. They started out making computers and ended up making, well, they still make computers, but I think at this point we would all agree that the thing we most want are the telephones. $1 million from 1,000. Time. Time is everything in investing. Buy a good company. Buy a company you believe in. Buy a business. Don't look at a stock price. Buy a business that you believe in. Hold it for your entire life. And magical things could happen. Now, I probably need to do a few disclaimers here, so let me do those. First off, there's no guarantee that any stock you buy, including Apple, which is one of the most popular stocks in the world, is going to give you this kind of return. In fact, you could buy Apple today and lose a whole bunch of money in a short period of time. Stocks go up, stocks go down. And they almost always go down some of the time. Sometimes so much that Makes you want to cry. I also need to disclaim that I own Apple. I own stock in the Apple Corporation. My family owns stock in the Apple Corporation. Our clients at Standfast trusted us with their money. Many of them own stock in the Apple Corporation. And we may buy stock in Apple, we may sell stock in Apple without giving you notice. So that's my talk today about apples. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for each of these tutorials every Thursday night at 6:22. Thanks for watching.